Next up, we have an update on cities water panel with Keith Rieger from the City of DeLand, Raul Palenzuela from Orange City, and Brad Blaze from Mead and Hunt. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Hard act to follow, but a lot of the projects, a lot of the things that Dinah went over without any discussion between the two. It's kind of a segue and alignment between our presentation and hers. My name is Brad Blaze. I'm a fourth generation Volusia County resident, so I'm very proud to have been working in the water resource business here in West Volusia since about the late 80s. I've worked with Keith for a lot of that time. And the West Volusia Water Supply Group is a combination of DeLand, Deltona, Orange City, and Volusia County Utilities. And this group was formed in, let's see if I can get this here. All right. All right, that's it. A couple key dates that we got here. We got 75 was when the Environmental Organization Act was enacted. Then you had in 91 St. John's developed minimum flows and levels. In 2006, the St. John's published the MFR for Blue Spring. 14, which very recently, the TMDL was established for the spring. And as far as 14 through 24 compliance dates for Blue Spring implementation occurred. Obviously, it ends up at 157 CFS. And during that time, the West Volusia Group, what is now the West Volusia Water Suppliers, gathered together saying these are problems that are not going to be handled by one utility. These are things that we need to do as a group. There was a predecessor organization, ironically, was the Volusian Water Alliance, and that kind of fractured, and then the West Volusia Group came on board. And in 2007, 2008, they formed a group, and we developed a transient groundwater flow model and developed a suite of projects and a new modeling effort to kind of change the approach instead of kind of a single silver bullet to make these changes and to solve these problems. We kind of migrated to an all-of-the-above approach, and kind of going through some of the types of things that we were trying to do is meet the current potable demand, future demand, coordinate projects, implement projects that everybody can agree upon that are good projects, and then be able to rank these and spend the money as wisely as possible. Obviously, all of these things require regulatory approval from St. John's and from DEP, because we've got the TMDL compliance issues, which sometimes was in conflict with some of the Blue Spring MFO goals. So how do you do these things and coordinate these? And fortunately, the group that we're working with has really done a great job of it. Obviously, the TMDL program is reducing the TN contributions by 45% throughout the spring shift. Okay, meanwhile, we're trying to do additional recharge. We're trying to do a lot of additional things. And so, how do we do that? What do we do to change the mass balance? And then ultimately, we have to gain approval by the customers, and we have to get approval by the elected officials. This affects rates. This affects, all of the things that affect all of us, the growth, the new development that comes in. So all of these things need to dovetail together, and ultimately, the compliance date is 2024, so it's right around the corner. And at the end of the day, fund and implement these programs and projects, and make sure that the projects that we do fund and implement are good projects. We're going to talk a little bit about the Barracuda project. It's a great project. It does a lot of things. But there are questions that need to be answered. It's going to be expensive. And there's things that we have to do to make it function with respect to treatment and settling. And we'll get there. As far as the all of the above approach, like I said, in early 2000s, there was a very heavy movement towards just basically potable supply, some type of treatment of surface water from the St. Johns River. This is the silver bullet, full speed ahead. A lot of the numbers came in. You're looking at $300-something million. You're looking at what you do with concentrate. There's a treatability study for the river water. I'm sure a lot of people remember all these things that kind of were moving ahead and sort of created what seemed like a problem that cannot be solved. So the group decided, what we really probably, the best way to approach this is in all of the above approach. Let's look at conservation. Conservation is a huge issue. We can reduce the per capita consumption. We can reduce the amount of demand. We can reduce reduce the amount of wastewater generated. It solves a variety of problems cheaply. Reclaimed water expansion and augmentation. So let's use reclaimed water to serve the non-potable uses and beneficially utilize the product that we're generating. So a lot of dollars and a lot of effort has been moved towards that. Problem is, when you generate a large demand for this utility, its highest point is when the availability is the lowest. Springtime, summertime, when you have very little rainfall and very low flows, you need additional water. So now we need to augment. Fortunately, we have a resource, the St. Johns River. St. John's has said roughly 155 million gallons a day is available. Probably less than 10 of that is currently allocated. So it's a great source for augmentation. The treatment requirements are lower for non-potable supply, and the byproducts that come off of it are also lower. Additionally, recharge enhancement. So if we can apply reclaimed water and or stormwater and or other water sources where they can do more good, then obviously we're going to increase the spring flow by increasing the amount of water going to where we want it. And then ultimately there's going to be new groundwater needed. The way that the group is moving is looking at developing new groundwater supplies outside of the spring shed. So there are properties, there are available water sources and potentially somewhat abundant water sources outside of the spring shed. So what I'd like to do today is kind of go through some of the things that we've done and talk about some of the things that we're getting ready to do and will be doing. And then when we get to some of the showcase projects, I'd like Keith and Raul to come up and kind of talk about those. And then we can have a little Q&A to ask questions about the projects that we're doing and where they may be as far as completion, planning, etc. Okay, conservation. We have done a pretty good job in West Volusia of conserving water. You can see the red line is population. Population back in 2000 was about 140,000 in the West Volusia area as far as equivalency is commercial residential. Currently in 2018 it's about 180,000. During that same time period, in 2006 we peaked at about 26 million gallons per day of withdrawal from groundwater sources as far as consumptive uses from the Florida Aquifer. In 2018 it is down to 18 million gallons a day. So we've looked at a 41% decrease in consumption and a 35% increase in population. So essentially what that means is we've taken a per capita consumption of about 160 and dropped it to below 100, about 95, which is great news. The problem is we're starting to reach that, let's call it the asymptotic point of diminishing returns. When you try to get much below 90, approaching 80 gallons per capita a day, it's tough. And it's that low-hanging fruit, that the low-flow toilets, the increased efficiency, not using potable groundwater for irrigation. All these types of things we're doing a great job of, and you can see what it's done for us. I tabulated that data. Let's go back. That's the data. This gives you the population numbers for the West Volusia utility groups. Again, the same utilities we talked about. The middle column is the demands. The far right is per capita consumption. And pretty much a steady decline from 160 to 95. So I think we should all be pretty proud of that. And how have we done that? I really can't see this very well. But what we did was we categorized all these projects. Like I said, it's all of the above approach. The new groundwater supply, the conservation and reclaimed water, the recharge projects, the water quality improvement projects. What we have done is put a different colored star, and you really can't see this, but what this map represents is all of East Volusia, and you would see stars all over this map, and I apologize for the inability to really see it well. But what you'll see is about 60 projects, and those 60 projects total about $150 million in capital, either currently expended funds, planned, or currently under construction projects. So we've come a long way. We've done a lot of very, very good projects. As far as the new groundwater supply, you can see there's about $34 million. It's either currently expended, i.e. the Deep Creek Buffer Parcel. That was a $28 million expenditure for lands, and they're well suited for water supply. So it is out of the spring shed. And there is test wells that have been done aquifer performance testing. There's a whole lot of work between here and there, but it could be a very good source of water. As far as the big stars, that's the conservation and reclaimed water initiatives. About $100 million of already constructed projects or planned projects. Another 3 or so of recharge projects, and then another 14, 15 of water quality improvements. So the purpose is to say, look, we are walking the walk and talking the talk about taking an all of the above approach. Doing all of these things instead of trying to put all the eggs in one basket. Probably can't see a lot of these, but I'll kind of highlight some of these projects, and this is what I'm calling the reclaimed water augmentation projects. This includes interconnects, where we have succeeded in interconnecting all of the reclaimed water systems throughout West Volusia. So DeLand, Deltona, Volusia County, everybody has their, DeLand and then Orange City, has their distribution systems and supply systems interconnected. We can share the resource. When wastewater effluent is generated, it no longer becomes a necessarily a benefit unless you have the ability to share it. Then it can be utilized wherever it's best needed. And if it's augmented, it can be shared at that point as well. And so this interconnect project was implemented about 5 years ago, and it's going to be the source water for a lot of these downline projects. Other projects, retrofit of reclaimed water. Most new subdivisions are dry land, which is great because the developers put in the pipes and all we got to do is hook them up, and then the residential construction has available reclaimed water, commercial descent. However, there's a lot of irrigation meters that are pulling off of potable supplies. So DeLand has taken a big step towards eliminating most of those where they are in existence or planning to implement those. You've got storage projects. Storage is essential. When you need the water, you need it. When you need it, sometimes you don't have it. So a lot of storage projects are underway, pumping projects and transmissions. So those are a whole laundry list of projects that all these green ones have been done. Pink, the blue, and the yellow, these are completed project or planned projects, engineered projects, or future projects. Some of these are the DeLand Phase 3 and 3A, Phase 4 projects, reclaimed water job. The ordinances requiring connection. If you have a potable irrigation meter on the potable system, you have to connect over reclaim when it's available. Other things is the augmentation from the river. Right now, DeLand has the ability to take 4 million gallons of water out of the river, treat it at their reclaimed water plant, and distribute it. Deltona is currently constructing 8 million gallons per day capacity off the river, and at the Alexander Avenue site, that job is complete. Next is, I think I went over one recharge. Okay. Okay. 2 minutes. All right. Okay. So we're kind of sharing.
Well, it's 3 of you, right?
Yeah.
It's okay. Nobody knows?
We sort of our time.
I'm gonna tell you when all of you have 2 minutes left.
Yeah,
That includes Q&A.
Our goal is to try to get through all this in about 30 minutes, or 30, 40 minutes, and then allow the balance for Q&A. And once we get to the showcase projects, Keith and Raul will kind of talk about those. And I was just trying to summarize the stuff that's been done. Again, the water quality projects. What are water quality projects? These are septic to sewer projects. These are other projects geared towards strictly cleaning up the water and achieving TMDL compliance. So you've got advanced wastewater treatment plant conversions. DeLand has recently converted their plant to AWT compliance, so they're able to produce a 5531, 5 suspended solids, 5 DOD, 3 nitrogen, 1 phosphorus. Southwest Regional Plant, the county project, that's been completed, and it's also an AWT project. And so all of these wastewater sources that will be generated and collected in these septic to sewer projects will come into the wastewater plants and be treated to the highest possible levels, and then can go back as nutrient-reduced effluent supplies for reclaimed water, recharge, etc. There's also, Orange City has a series of projects that are also included in this list. And again, this will be made available so you can kind of go through these projects in greater detail than I can here. Groundwater supplies from outside the spring shed kind of falls in two major categories. Right now, the land is planning and actually in the state revolving fund facility planning phase for a new water plant, which is going to be adjacent to the fairground property. And we're also looking at well fields in and around the fairgrounds, which is outside the spring shed. And then a little bit east on 44 and north of 44, which is the, I think it's called the Bicentennial Park property. And that's the source of water for that site. And again, the Deep Creek Luffler, that water would, at least conceptually, be pumped out of the ground in the Deep Creek Luffler area, transmitted, conveyed back, and then treated in this area for distribution throughout western Volusia County. One problem, currently all the water that we use in West Volusia is not lime softened, and treatment is minimal. We've been very blessed with very inexpensive costs for treatment, typically aeration, chemical stabilization, disinfection, and distribution. So when we get into these other water supplies, it's going to be more expensive. We're looking at softening. We're looking at reducing organics. And there's a lot of things that are going to have to be done, which are going to change the unit cost of that water. But it does add to the suite of projects. And with that, I'd like to kind of transition over to Keith to talk about the interconnect projects and then the borrow pit and the treatment plant projects.
Okay. So several years ago, the West Volusia suppliers realized that we couldn't necessarily get all the reclaimed water to the right places at the right time. And so we banded together to try to design some interconnects so that we could share the reclaimed water, as Brad stated. We had some good partners in this, besides the other cities and the county working together cooperatively. The St. Johns River Water Management District has been a really good partner in providing cost share funding. So we were able to leverage our local residents' rates, raise the money that they pay in order to do these projects. And so it's worked very well. We've used these interconnects in times when we run out of reclaimed water in certain areas during the drought periods. It's been very effective. And as we move forward with additional projects, such as the Borrow Pit project, and we'll discuss that in some more detail, these interconnects will be very critical. I also mentioned that we had a model for that. Back in the early 2000s, I guess, all the cities in Volusia County got together, and on the east side of the county and on the west side of the county, the east side cities and the west side cities interconnected with themselves. And so we developed potable water interconnects as well. And so times when we have a major line break in the land, for example, we can wheel water from Volusia County and even all the way up from Deltona if necessary, and vice versa. So that's proven to be a very good thing.
Is anybody familiar with the Alexander Avenue Water Resource Area? Essentially north of Lake Monroe, in Deltona, just north of Enterprise, is the 80-acre site. On this site, the city of Deltona has constructed a series of rapid infiltration basins, stormwater treatment systems, surface water intake coming from Lake Monroe, and also the effluent from the Eastern Water Reclamation Facility out on 415. If you all know where that is, by Doyle Road. That's a membrane bioreactor plant, and the effluent from that site is plumbed all the way back here to the Alexander Avenue site, where it is recharged into the ground. So you've got currently a 40-acre parcel beneath the lower portion that is a combination reuse, storage, and pumping. There's two 2 million gallon storage tanks. There is a reuse pump station. There is a series of sand filters, an $11 million project that Deltona constructed to treat stormwater and surface water from the Lake Monroe to use as an augmentation source. There's also rapid infiltration basins. Currently there are 7, and they take stormwater from throughout the area that is recharged into that site. And there's a joint project that West Volusia Water Suppliers reclaim ribs, and you can see the 3 ponds on the north side of that site is going to be additional rib sites for additional recharge and management of water resources. There's also a planned and currently permit application pending for a lower Florida aquifer storage and recovery line, where reclaimed water will be pumped into the lower Florida aquifer about 2,000 feet below the ground, below the confining layer that separates the upper from the lower, and utilized as storage during times of surplus of stormwater and or effluent, that it can be stored and then beneficially pulled back over time and utilized as reclaimed water for recharge, for irrigation, and a lot of other purposes, in addition to avoiding the need to discharge the surface waters if there is an abundant or excess of effluent. So it's an interesting site, so if you're ever on Google Earth kind of cruising around looking at different things, you can look immediately north. It is east of I-4, and it's kind of near that confluence of Enterprise Road and I-4. And the next phase is currently out, has been bid and will be constructed, and then the LFA well will follow. From that, we'll go to the Barrow Pit. There's 2 slides on this.
Hi. Okay, so the Barrow Pit, as we've already heard about. Let me just tell you a little bit more about what it is and what the objectives are. And for example, this view, this large view that you see here, is looking towards the southeast. Okay, and this is basically about over a bird's eye view over, let's say, the bridge that goes over the railroad tracks into the state park, if you're familiar with the area. Okay, looking in the southeast direction. That road down there is West French Avenue, and this is from the chapter of hiding in plain sight type of thing. So there's this activity that's right next to the railroad, right next to the state park, and it's a sand pit that's been essentially mined out. And when originally, the original concept came up by question of whether this site could be used to store or divert, let's say, stormwater or flood mitigation water, let's say, from the Mill Lake area. And the initial response was basically possibly, but in consultation with the West Volusia water suppliers and St. Johns River Water Management District, which are the real brains of the operation there, they said, well, possibly even more than that, could we use it as a place to put wet weather discharge and other discharges from the advanced wastewater treatment and reclaimed water system that we've all just interconnected and invested in interconnecting. So, and could there be a benefit to Blue Spring as a result, and also a side benefit for the as a park feature or for birds and other fauna. So this site was available, and on the right you'll see 2 artist renderings of what it could become with some overlooks and some plantings, and there will be cells that could be built there with using terracing and other concepts to flow water from the reclaimed water system and from Mill Lake into this area. And then there would be these terraces would be built with this biologically activated media or something like that to aid in the nitrogen removal naturally with it, along with providing a wet area for birds to use as habitat. Okay. So, as I mentioned originally, this was a concept for stormwater discharge. And it may not be very obvious to see, but you'll see where it says Mill Lake up there. Well, there's an existing stormwater force main that was built by the FDOT long ago that goes and pumps today out to the St. Johns River. So all that water is just going directly to the river today. That's it, just like a short circuit, just going straight out. And so the concept was, could we use some of that, can we use that instead of adding to flooding elsewhere in St. Johns River, could we divert that instead to a place like this Barrow Pit that could be a chance to further treat the water and maybe get some groundwater recharge benefit out of it. And so the answer is, again, possibly. The other contribution would be from the reclaimed water system, and that's shown in the purple here. However, there's a missing link, that dotted line there, and that would have to be built if we prove out the concept in the next year, which is the initial phase of this project. So in the next year, I believe before September 30th of the next year, we've got to prove out that the area is appropriate, that let's say it has the permeability to accept the flows that we're planning to send into that area, and that the water quality will be appropriate for something that's going to be so close to the spring. So those are the two big questions that we have to answer in the coming year. And then, of course, the West Volusia Water Supplier, St. Johns River Water Management District, and a lot of other agencies are involved in trying to pull that together to get those answers, because we want to plan afterwards. If it works, what do we do? And if it doesn't work, what do we do? So we're all prepared with that, and like I said, but the first order of business is to prove the concept. Okay. So other elements, like I said, a bird wildlife sanctuary is possible, and of course the idea is recharge benefit Blue Spring to increase flow by 2 to 3 CFS, cubic feet per second. And that could be a nature park element that was shown in those renderings in the previous slide.
Okay. Thanks, Raul. So just very briefly, we are planning some other projects. I think we've talked to you about conservation. We've talked to you about reclaimed water and recharge of the aquifer, which is part of the equation. And the other thing is trying to find some more water, because as we know, our population is growing in Volusia County. I heard a land development attorney speak at our city commission meeting the other night, and he said that by 2030, they anticipated 22,000 additional county. And everybody's shaking their head, so am I, because I don't know where we're going to put them, and you know, its impact on our little community is going to be pretty drastic. But you know, as engineers and you know, we don't really have a whole lot of say about, you know, how many people come here. You know, we have some land development regulations, but you know, the population has increased pretty steadily over the years, and we anticipate it's going to continue to increase. So we need to be able to supply utilities to everyone, to continue to supply them, and then also try to meet the regulatory requirements, both in terms of quality of water and quantity of water. And so one of the things we're looking at is obtaining additional water supply from east of the Blue Spring spring shed, outside of the Leon Spring shed. And so that's going to require construction of additional wells and turning down or turning off wells that are closer to those springs. So we're planning for that in the future. One of the projects we're looking at is we have an existing water repump facility the city of DeLand does at the fairgrounds site. It's been there for many years. We've improved it over the years. And we are looking at constructing some additional wells out of that general area in order to supply some additional water. We are looking at 6 to 8 new water supply wells, and we believe that water is of lesser quality than the water that we currently pump closer in. So we'll have to do some additional treatment, what we call lime softening, to make sure that the water is appropriate quality and meets with our water requirements. Figure this out. Whoops, almost a thank you. And I'll speak for a moment about the Deep Creek Leffler property. I think one of our speakers earlier mentioned, I think Dinah mentioned it, you know, that the county purchased several years ago the Leffler property, a giant farm out, you know, kind of in the middle portion of the county. It is a big piece of property, kind of now in an undeveloped area. The county has, in cooperation and with funding from the other West Volusia utilities, done some test wells, some very large test wells, and looked at the water quality and also pumped those wells enough to determine the performance of the aquifer, in other words, the amount of water that can be safely removed from those wells. And we believe that there's 2 to 4 million gallons a day available from that site. So I think with the help of the other cities, the county will eventually be able to develop that property safely and provide additional water to serve West Volusia. I think at this point we're done with the formal portion of our presentation. I want to thank Brad Blaze very much. You know, his firm, formerly Quinton Hampton, now Mead and Hunt, has done a lot with the utilities. They've done a little bit more than just their projects that they've been assigned and been paid for, but they've always you know, stepped up a little bit and tried to do you know, pull people together and so forth. So I appreciate Brad's efforts in preparing this and so forth.